My name is Nurit Zunger. I'm the deputy editor of the primetime English edition at I-24 News, based on the other side in the Jaffa port in Israel. And a great jumping off point there. Here, as Valerie mentioned earlier, the IDC, the Herzliya conference, it's very closely, the core of it is in many ways politics and diplomacy and strategy. And this particular set of economic panels is very closely linked, in fact, to that, because as all of us really know at this point, Israel's innovators, Israel's companies are sort of the modern ambassadors for Israel, whether really they like to be or not. And from what Professor Petersburg said, many of them, if we're to take what his argument, many of them maybe are not doing it in the right way and as they should. So under this panel of Israeli corporations in the global marketplace, we'll look a little bit at the flip side of the previous panel and go a little further into what Professor Petersburg just mentioned. So let me just reintroduce everybody since we had a little bit of a break. Ms. Tzipi Ozer-Armon, CEO of Lumenis. Dr. Orna Berry, Corporate VP of Growth and Innovation at the EMC Centers of Excellence, including in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the US. Mr. Avishai Avrahami, CEO of Wix. Mr. Gilad Novik, CTO of Horizons Ventures, and at the end, Mr. Gadi Tirosh, Managing Partner of Jerusalem Venture Partners. So I have to start with what Professor Petersburg just mentioned, his argument at Teva, and sort of let's take a snapshot of Israel before we go into the global marketplace. And when you have so few and some quite startling statistics, major companies in Israel, and rather you have a lot more smaller companies and perhaps this exit model that we hear a lot about. Why is that the case? And I want to start with you. For M&As, for example, as something that was mentioned, why is it perhaps difficult for Israel to be a country of major corporations and not just of small startups?
Okay, so I think that the first starting point actually relates to the fact that we have a very small market. So Israel, the local market, and the neighboring market is a very small market, which means that if you want to be a large company, you have to go global. And there are difficulties in going global, but if you want to be real global, you have to play the game of M&A. And I think that what happens here is there are two types of companies. The sharks that eats the predators, and the one that are the prey. And I think that if you want to be a large company, you must do an M&A. You must be the one that is acquiring companies. And in order to acquire companies, you need to have two things. One is you need to have the right business acumen and standards and status in terms of the size, which is more difficult for us to get, in terms of the global managers, people who will attract companies that you want to acquire to be working for them, and the ability to do and the experience to do integration, and at the same time to have the right financing. Okay, and I think that if we look at all of these factors, getting financing in Israel, I'm sure that many people here will agree with me that it is more difficult, as well as getting, kind of the first size of scale to allow you to be large enough in size and in capital market value. So all of these, I think, makes and the fact that we are really far away from from buying companies abroad. So I think all of these factors makes it more difficult for an Israeli company to do M&A, which makes it more difficult for us to become larger and global.
Before we continue with others on this, to take this point, we hear a lot of rosy pictures, like was also mentioned in the opening remarks, about how Israel supports the startup nation and supports the concept of startups. So from your experience, on the other hand, while the government, the country may support that, on the flip side, to actually grow large companies, it's holding companies back.
So I think that moving from kind of startups to a big company, it's almost a contradiction, because for a startup, what you have is you have people who are very much entrepreneur. They are very good in getting things done, in problem solving and execution, but they are very bad in processes. They need to be very good in the product, in the technology. And you don't need to have like people who know how to manage 20,000 people, but you need to have like mid-level management. So if you look at big companies, this is totally the opposite. What you need is not the product, but you need the go-to-market. That's what differentiates the small companies from the big company. You don't need the entrepreneurship so much, but you need the processes. And at the same time, you cannot trust and you cannot count on mid-level managers, but you need to have managers with a lot of scale and experience. So I think that all the things that makes us so great in terms of the startups are the things that we are totally missing, handicapped on the other, because this means that we need to change totally the rules of the game. I mean, we can understand very easily what is it to move from being, kind of a small fish in a small pond to be like a large fish in a medium pond. But to be a large company like Teva, this means that you need to be a shark in an ocean. It means to redefine the totally the addressable market. And that is, it's a jump that is very complex. And on the other hand, it takes a lot of time.
So I want to go to Mr. Avrahami for the same question from your perspective, also coming from Wix, from a born and bred Israeli company. You have, I think, some perspectives on the exit model, on versus trying to get out to sell early versus staying and growing.
The company, we were probably the first company that broke off the model of selling, right? We got a lot of offers and we refused them. And we worked with other startups and in order to convince them not to sell when they could, in order to grow companies. And I agree with what you said. I think that every stage in a company lifetime requires a different skill set. But most of the large companies on earth were built by entrepreneurs. And one of the other things that happened in Israel is that 20 years ago, we didn't have people with experience in managing people. Today, we have more people that have that experience. And so I think it's becoming possible to build companies that are larger, at which we have 1,000 people. And of course, it's not easy, but we're getting better in doing that. The other thing that, when I think about it, to build a large company out of Ireland, you still need to break outside, right? They have 3, right? If I remember what he said. Ireland, if I remember correctly, is about a quarter of Israel in terms of the population. So that would make it 12 compared to 1, right? If you look at it. I think it's 2 million people, no? How much? 5 million. All right, so that would make it 4, right? If you look at the scale. And we're 7.5.
No, we're not 7.5.
I mean, 8.5, so that's even bigger. But it's, and they have an island. And what I'm trying to say, I think the real big problem in Israel, and this is from what I joined the chairman of Teva and said that it's pretty much regulation and the government. And this is, every day I face that, every day we see that. That's probably the biggest challenge. The other one is, of course, is mentality. It's convincing people that it is possible to build large companies out of Israel. So once you get both things working, it should happen. And one of them will happen with time, meaning more people will see more companies being successful and want to do the same. The other thing is, well, as you said, the government one day will have to decide that's important.
So before we get into the sort of venture capitals and a little more practical guidance of what takes a small startup or a promising company to a global scale, Dr. Berry, I want to stay on this subject on multinational corporations, because if we're already talking about larger companies in Israel and how to sort of change that model, what you do at EMC is a little bit different. Tell us a bit about that.
So, first of all, I want to say that the government was elected democratically by us. So we're responsible for how it acts. We had the option not very long ago. The other aspects, I think that the operation of multinational corporations in Israel varies a great deal. I think that a company like Intel, who has an impact with its design center of about 60% of Intel's revenue, is a different place than, and its contributions to the development of places like Kiryat Gat by creating manufacturing facilities that has the highest yield in the Intel full scale of manufacturing. This is a different daring approach than just making R&D in Israel. So I will talk about myself, and I will talk about EMC. The EMC has about 1,500 people in Israel. Basically, 1,250 are net EMC, and 250 are VMware, which is 80% owned by EMC. Acquisitions, 12 acquisitions in Israel. Some of the acquisitions are key growth engines of the corporate. And one very important activity that is organic is the establishment in Be'er Sheva. EMC is the first multinational corporation to have set foot in Be'er Sheva. And what is most important was that it actually committed and hence allowed Gav Yam Negev to build the advanced technology park across from the university and by the forthcoming C5I campus of the Ministry of Defense. So if we are looking at the triangle in Israel that is somewhat bypassing, and I fully agree with Itzik Peterburg on the limitations. And I think that the antitrust need to go to learn both law and economics. This applies to the unification of defense industries. But what we have done is actually combined expertise, talent, and global opportunity. So we're looking very carefully on the go-to-market and the infrastructure that the corporate has globally in what we do in Israel. And consequently, our contribution to the economy is far more than just the taxes that are paid by the employees. We are building a new infrastructure in a place that there was none, and we are addressing the periphery, which needs very carefully to be addressed economically for housing problems and for education, health, and other things, and we are actually allowing it to happen. We're anchor.
Can you imagine this model being replicated elsewhere in Israel with other companies, or do you think what you have is unique and survived sort of despite the obstacles that we've been talking about?
In Israel, you need to be very hard-headed, because I will not repeat what Itzik has said before. He was right on the spot. Clearly, you need to do that, because you need to use 60% of the land with less than 10% of the population, with one chemical manufacturer saying that they own 20% of the Negev's economy, which sucks. And consequently, you can do it in the Galilee and you can do it in the Negev, and this is a combination of interests that at the end of the day have global outcome, very becoming global outcome, but are very, very well tied to development of academic education, to development of those professions that are important in the market. And now, when we go back to talking about the health IT, what Itzik mentioned was actually originated when he was managing the Soroka Hospital in Be'er Sheva. Now we need to reinvent it, because we lost the prime position in the market. So there are several areas that we can actually connect with and have unique opportunities in Israel, very, very high talent, very good science, and just let's move it.
So let's take a turn for the positive for a moment and go to competitive advantages, to what is it about Israeli companies? I think this is very positive.
We have such professions as data science globally serving out
Certainly
of Be'er Sheva.
Certainly the potential is extremely positive,
The issue is, by all measures, we have things done. We just need to multiply them, and we need not to be shy about connecting with our strengths, not with our strength because of apologies. Just get it done.
So exactly on this point of the strengths, I want to go a little bit towards the venture capitals. What are the strengths? For you, Mr. Novik, for example, just in Horizon's portfolio, there's 29 Israeli companies. It's a huge percentage of what you guys do. What for you is the sort of competitive advantage of Israeli companies versus others you encounter?
I think it's mainly the human power, or let's say actually the companies that we actually try to invest are companies that bring disruptive technologies into the market. What we try to do in Horizon Ventures, we try to actually bring technologies that will make a difference to all of us, to the major population. So what we try to identify are those specific technologies that can bring that difference. For example, we were investors in Skype, who actually made a big difference on how we actually communicate between each other. A second company is Siri, which has been acquired by Apple, that actually was the first artificial intelligence personal assistant technology, and many, many others. The companies that we invest here in Israel bring a very important asset. One of them is the experience of the entrepreneurs. The majority of them come from 3 to more years experience in the military service. They work on a specific project, then they try to commercialize it to the consumer world and bring that technology outside. And that's a big advantage.
So, Mr. Tirosh, first of all, the same question for you. What stands out in Israeli companies?
So, I'd say if I need to characterize one thing that really stands out in Israel compared to any other place, it's not necessarily about the technology. I think you have smart people all over the world, and you have good education in other places and so on. It's probably our ability to adapt, and to adapt very quickly. And we need to realize that in the areas that at least JVP operates in, which is media technology, cybersecurity, storage, enterprise software, the ability to adapt is actually the one big advantage, the competitive advantage that the company has. And it changes over and over again through its life. So, going back to the discussion that we had here about building large companies, what we need to keep in mind that in the way to create large companies, we don't kill the actual engine that created the high-tech miracle here in Israel. It goes back to the ability to adapt. I mean, the ability of an entrepreneur to create a new thing, to quickly adapt to changing needs in the market, and then maybe move to the next thing is part of our essence. We should not lose that ability. We should be able to go and translate it into much larger companies. And there, one thing that I think relates to what Professor Peterburg is doing in Teva and Avishai is doing in Wix. These are companies that the Israeli entrepreneurs own the destiny of the company, okay? And when we own the destiny of our own companies, there is an opportunity to create a large company. I've been fortunate enough to be part of building 2 significant cyber companies out of Israel. One of them, NDS, turned out to be the largest exit in tech out of Israel, and it was sold to Cisco. The moment it was sold to Cisco, and I hope I don't have too many colleagues from Cisco over here, the moment it was sold to Cisco, the company that at that point had about 6,000 people around the world, 1,200 in Jerusalem, lost the ability to affect its own destiny, okay? And we saw from there on, there was degradation in performance and so on.
If we're talking then about this point from a perspective of venture capitals, because that's what, if we're looking at smaller companies, a lot of them, that's their number one thing, where they get to a certain level, they want to get seed money, they want to go to round A and so on. Is there an interest, a vested interest for venture capitals like yours, like JVC, like Horizons Ventures, in taking those companies that you invest in, those Israeli companies, and helping them to grow inside Israel?
So that's the second example I wanted to give you. It's a company that JVP was one of the founding investors in, a company called CyberArk. And it's a company we've created in 2004, okay? Then about 3 years ago, not that far after the financial crisis, we came to a junction. We had investors that wanted to get out of the company, actually cash out and monetize. While the company, the CEO of the company, Udi Mukadi, and the rest of the management team wanted to continue and push forward and own their own destiny. Now, we were, we had the ability to go in as JVP, actually buy some of the other investors and continue to push the company forward to create what I hope going to be a significant global company. We IPO'd last year, on NASDAQ on September. It's now the best performing IPO of 2014. And there is a real chance here of creating a global leader in cybersecurity, by the way, also through acquiring potentially other companies within Israel and growing like that. But the one thing that drove that was that, on the investor base, you had Israelis that had that as part of their manifest to create a big company out of Israel. You had the entrepreneurs and the management team that are fully committed to that. And without that, I wonder if it would be such a big success out of Israel.
So let's stay on the point of going global. That is, after all, the title of this panel, Mr. Avrahami. From your perspective of inside the company, of creating this company, what are some of the challenges? Let's even talk about business culture, for example. We talk a lot about the actual technology. We talk about the actual product. What kind of changes do Israeli companies need to go through in order to actually be successful on the global sphere?
Well, I think that you can't go global to a country without understanding something about the culture, right? So you need to, if you want to market in the United States, you have to know how to market to Americans. If you want to market to Russians, you have to know how to market to Russians. And from experience now, I can tell you it's very different. If you want to be able to have a global company, well, the first thing is that you need to have the common language in the company being English. So people can actually communicate with people from different cultures. For example, in Wix, almost all the communication is in English. When we do company events, it's in English. When we do, most of our email will be in English. All the internal communication in the company will be in English. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, is that today we live in a world where it's relatively easy to reach to a different place. And physically, of course, airplanes are much cheaper than they used to be 10 years ago, compared to how much money we all have. The other thing is that you can actually do a lot from your home, right? You go from your office. You can advertise in Russia without ever leaving your room. You can do sales in different countries without leaving the room. We have sales from 196 countries, and I think we're going to have Cuba joining soon because now it's legal. So probably going to be 197 soon. And we don't have presence in most of those countries, right? Things just happened. But I think the hardest thing is, to your question, what is the most important thing is really learning about the culture, understanding, testing what works, creating something that is specific to a place, again, by working a lot with people from that country that you want to go to. I think that the advantage of being in a modern world is that you can test a lot, do a lot very easily, and you can do it from your home or from your office. So, and that changing, I think that, by the way, is a huge positive change for Israeli companies, because it allows us to do a lot of it without flying to different countries, right? In Switzerland, you can just cross the border and be in Germany, right?
So going back to you, Ms. Ozer-Armon, do you think this, in terms of where you can expand to, of course it might be more relevant to some industries than others. If you're a mobile company, if you're a web company, we might be able to say there are no borders anymore at all. How big of a change is this sort of, it's no longer really new, but this new global atmosphere where maybe borders, which for Israel, of course, is always a very pertinent thing, aren't as relevant anymore?
So I think it really depends on the industry. I think there are some people who are very fortunate that they operate in a regulatory-free environment. I can say that almost regulatory-free environment. I can, kind of say that for example, the area that I'm operating in, medical device, is a highly regulated area. So every region, every country has got its own regulation. Which makes it in a way more difficult for companies to penetrate. But on the same time that it makes it more difficult to penetrate, it makes it more difficult to penetrate not only for us, but for everyone. And I think that there is one big advantage coming from Israel compared to companies that are operating, say, in the US. So if you look at an American company, because they have been working, for example, with the FDA, they believe that they know everything that they need to know, and they are looking to get approval, for example, in China or in Japan, because they got the approval from the FDA. I think the advantage coming from Israel is that we are very modest, okay, in that regard. And because we are very modest in that regard, we give the full respect, and I think this is kind of it goes even more further, kind of beyond regulatory. Regulatory force you to give the respect, but we give more respect to the truly understanding of what are the local market requirements. So it starts with regulatory, because that is your ticket to play. Without getting the regulatory approval, you cannot sell anything. But then it moves to all the other aspects of doing business in a country. So when you're doing a business in every country, understanding the local culture and the local requirements in every country, that's what makes the difference, because it's well beyond the product. Okay, people think it is about the product. But other people do have good products as well. It's all about how you deliver this product to the market, whether you make some adjustment to the product, and how you communicate the value and the differentiation to the end customer. And I think that from that point of view, actually, in Israel, we do have the advantage. Okay, so this advantage, the fact that we are in a very, very small country, coming from a very small base, makes us so modest when we go abroad. And it makes us actually with the ability to be more successful in what I call the non-traditional market. So if I take, for example, I was working for SanDisk, and SanDisk was trying to penetrate Japan for many, many years. And it was almost impossible, very, very difficult. And after a year there in Japan, we've almost tripled the market share, and we became number one. And the major difference was that when SanDisk was approaching Japan, it was looking at it from an American hat. Okay, this is what they need, the Japanese need, because that is the best thing out there. But when we were looking kind of as Israeli in our DNA, we were looking at it as, what do the Japanese want? Because, for us, these are Japanese, these are Chinese, these are American. We respect everyone. And I think that this is something that in terms of, kind of the DNA that also Gadi spoke about, the fact that there are some very good things about our DNA. I think these are some of the very good things that we have in our DNA that actually can allow us, if we make the decision, and I do agree that it's about a decision that the companies here and the investor here needs to make, that can allow us to be a by far greater and larger global company.
So I want to go back to you, Mr. Novik, based on something you just mentioned. You're saying that everybody has a good product. Of course, if we're really looking at the global marketplace as a whole, whether the US, European, the Asian markets, there are a lot of companies with a lot of very good products and, fair to say, very good human capital. Take us through some of your process in taking a small company with a lot of potential, with a good product, like many others, and actually bringing it to the next level and the next level.
Sure, absolutely. So I think when we actually look into companies, we're looking into certain things. The first thing is the entrepreneurs. After we actually pass that element, we are looking for the IP behind the technology to see that there is a strong IP. Then whether we can actually bring any help to that company. So if we can bring value to the company, we will actually join and invest in the company. And the reason why we want to bring that value is in order to help them to get to the place that they want to get. And what is that value that we can actually bring over? In few elements. The first element is our operational units. So Horizon Ventures is part of a bigger organization. One of the sister companies is Hutchison Whampoa, who are the owners of 13 mobile operators, ports around the world, energy companies, and many, many others. So if we can find synergy between one of the startups and it can bring value to the bigger companies, of course we will make introductions. We will bring them over. We will introduce them to the right people, either if it's vendors, operators, or many, many others. So that's the value that we try to bring in that aspect. There are other elements. So when you think about China is a big place. So what is the value that we can actually bring? So just as an example, one of our portfolio companies over there is Tom.com. Tom.com is one of the biggest content providers in China, working with local operators and many others. They are the sole distributor of Skype, branded Tom Skype in China, with more than 100 million downloads and users. So when you think of increasing your user base, think of a small startup from Israel want to increase its user base. It's a very easy way to ride on top of Tom Skype in China, and suddenly after 2 weeks you have 2 million of users over there. Another example is ways. We introduce ways to all of our 13 mobile operators in order to increase their positioning either in those specific countries and at the same time to increase their user base as well.
So, Mr. Tirosh, kind of going off of this point, if you don't have all of these sort of sister companies, if you are a company first starting out, how do you compete, for example, with China, with a marketplace that size, which is hard to even compare to Israel?
So I'll share with you a little bit of our secret sauce and how we help companies build up, because it's tough building up a company out of Israel. Usually what we get is very talented technological entrepreneurs, and really we see our mission to wrap them and help them out in getting into the market. So one of the things that we did in JVP, we decided to focus on a few areas and build critical mass within those investment sectors. So we followed DMC to Beersheba. I think you were first and we were number 2. So we had somebody to host us in Beersheba. And we opened up our JVP Cyber Labs incubator in Beersheba beginning of 2014. And since then, we invested in 6 companies out of Beersheba. 3 of them already got follow-on investment. One of them was actually sold. It was an exit to PayPal. The interesting story about that is PayPal is now committed to build the Cyber Design Center in Beersheba. Now, by building this critical mass in certain areas, what you create your own ecosystem. So, we have strategic investments into those companies from anyone from EMC to Cisco to Oracle to IBM, Siemens, and so on. They're all coming over there to see not just one startup at a time, but actually see a whole set of companies and leadership in the cybersecurity space. And of course, wherever we can, we're sharing resources, networking, and so on to help them out because it's difficult. And when it's difficult, if people can group together and break through together, it helps. So we did that in cyber. Kobe, my partner, who's here in the audience, did a very similar thing in storage, where we've created a few companies, including Extreme.io, that was sold to EMC, and Reduxio, which is now going in that and probably beyond that. And then in media technology, we did the same thing. And that's what we do. We don't spread into too many areas, and we're trying to create critical mass in the areas that we understand.
Is that maybe a little key, what you mentioned, the case with PayPal? If there's a commitment, if you are going in the direction of an exit, and again, to bring it back to what Professor Petersburg said at the beginning, is that maybe a bit of a key to solving the problem and preserving the exit? That is, when you enter into an agreement with a buying company, a commitment to continue growth inside Israel?
So, definitely in the case of SciActive, the company we've created in Beersheba and sold to PayPal, a major part of the negotiation there was to make sure that they building up their design center in Beersheba. It was important to us. It was very important to the entrepreneurs as well. Since they were acquired just a few months ago, they almost doubled in size. That being said, it still doesn't serve the notion that we discussed earlier of owning your own destiny. Okay, I think at the end of the day, if you want to create a significant operation out of Israel, you need to own your own destiny and go and push for independent companies. You cannot do that with every company, but those that has the chance, I think, should we as investors and the rest of the high-tech community should support that cause.
Looking for a moment at the picture of what the global marketplace is, because the title of this panel is sort of very general. It's a big, vague term. Dr. Berry, we'll go to you. Israel is normally, we hear a lot about Israel's partnerships with the United States, with Europe, a little bit less so with Asia. Which market, if we're looking a bit at the bigger picture, has the most potential today for Israel?
It's different to say what is the most potential and to say what is the best for Israeli firms. And clearly the United States presents a single, homogeneous, very large market and a great partner in creating the food chain of creativity, innovation, execution, go-to-market, and success. However, Gadi was modest, and since we're close together, he has investments from China, and he has dealing with China. So do we, direct. So the issue of China is intriguing and is evolving to be very important, and as is Asia-Pacific, Japan. So we are, as Tzipi said, very open to other cultures, very open to learn what are the requirements in other markets. And consequently, out of Israel, we're adapting into new markets where in the United States it would be considered a secondary importance because of the difficulty to penetrate the market, time required, and modifications as well. And we do that. So the fastest growth, the rapid growth markets, Brazil, Russia, hesitant right now, China and India are very important markets. And we collaborate heavily with those markets. Actually, today my role covers also those markets as well.
So, Mr. Avrahami, same sort of question for you. From the perspective of running your company, is China a market that how focused are you on that market versus others, and what are the challenges in actually breaking in?
So I think that for us currently, if you look, the United States is the biggest single market. Then it's followed by Brazil, England, and in Russia. And I think that going to India or China, it can be a bit more tricky. China, when it comes to internet, has a lot of regulation, more actually than medical devices. It's easier to sell medical devices in China than to do internet things. And we're not so good at regulation. India is, of course, interesting, but there's a lot of other small countries, right, which kind of like almost any place in Europe. The one really good thing about the internet is that it's pretty global. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that we had chances to see things like a small village called Ait Bogomez from the Atlas Mountain in Morocco, where they got electricity 2 years before they started to build Wix websites. Right? It's a place that was so poor, they just got a road, electricity. 2 years later, the whole village was building Wix websites. For me, that's amazing. And
that's incredible. We mentioned a few markets. We mentioned Europe, and with the word Europe, I can't help but think of BDS, something that's been brought up, I'm sure will continue to be brought up in other panels and was also in the previous, but especially with a case like Orange that's in the news now. I'll go back to you, Tzipi. How big of a deal let's start with the basics. How big of a deal is BDS in terms of the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement? Is the reputation of Israel in taking a company from here and global?
So I can say that from our experience, we're selling to both to governments. We're selling a medical device and we're studying aesthetics device. Aesthetics usually it will be to clinics, to doctors. Usually from the medical side, we would sell usually to hospital. Many times it will be owned by government. We haven't came across that problem. Okay. Usually people, when they evaluate the way that we see it, they evaluate it based on merit, based on how good the technology is and whether this technology can bring a real differentiation in terms of the benefits to the patient. And these are compared with the price and service and all the other things. But overall, we haven't come across, I would say, yet. I do think that the situation is, on a personal level, I think that it's an unhealthy situation, and although I understand that the people in Israel have selected this government that was elected, I do wish that this government would take different routes that will take us away from the path that we're in.
Dr. Barry,
we don't feel it at the moment.
I want to go back a little bit in your experience, back to Ornet decades ago, and Siemens, and the cell, being a company being sold to a major European conglomerate, maybe one of the first in Israel's case.
The first.
How has the first? So how has Israel's relationship with the European market, especially in the wake of these movements, changed from 1995 back then?
I don't want to use terms that I use at the dinner table with my kids.
Please, feel free.
No, but I will refrain from those. Look, the Jews are not liked, and Europe is certainly the place where they are not liked the most. When you talk to business people, not the ones who are just in the midst of pleasing an Arab host, they like working with Israel certainly more than they like working in the region because the business practices are more straightforward. When you talk about considerations, including oil or other considerations of volume and including dollar volume, Qatar and FIFA and everything, then of course we're at a disadvantage, and the more it is combined with anti-Semitism, the worse it is for us. But I spent many years in Europe. Means not living in Europe, I lived about a year and a quarter, but I sold the company. I was in Europe following this sale 1 day a week. I served on the European Union Research Advisory Board, and I can tell you that on a one-on-one, they listen very carefully because they have great esteem. On a one-to-many, in a political situation, we're in a deficiency, and I will be a follower of Tzipi in saying that we need to treat the situation as a country differently, and if you have another session, I'm willing to tell you what is my plan.
So we won't get into the entire plan, but I do want to follow up on that. Of course, the government, if we're talking about the political relationship and having a foreign minister and having a connection with the foreign governments and building a narrative that is what a country wants it to be, there's also the companies themselves. Is there something that entrepreneurs, that startups, that the actual companies can do in the face of these movements, or is it really up to the government to change the perception?
We can do a lot as individuals, but I think Itzhak Peterburg said that it's also a regulatory environment. And I don't mean regulatory in the fact that it's the FDA regulation, but if we don't say on the political stage what is our plan for stabilization, I don't mean kissing and hugging necessarily, but I mean stabilization and consideration of human need in the region, regardless of the extreme movements that we can count some of them internally. If we don't say that, we're going to be in bad shape. If we're going to say that and we're going to act on that, you talked about practicalities. It's a tactical issue and a strategic issue that we also need to start acting.
Mr. Avrahami, from your perspective at Wix, is it something although you've described being an internet company and not having borders and having the luxury of a sort of lack of regulations, do you find that having somewhere, even in the small print, the Israeli tag with the company has held you back in any way?
Well, no, not yet. I would expect to see that something will happen in the future because the trend is heading that way, and you don't have to hit the wall, right, to know that it's there. But on our perspective, it's actually even more weird because a lot of the political sites going to any direction that you can imagine are actually built on our platform. So we have platforms that say boycott Israel and platforms that say almost every other thing. And it's kind of very hard for us.
One of the many ironies of the Middle East.
It is. It's true. It's kind of funny to see that boycott Israel built on Wix. But we have a bunch of those. As a company, what we try to do is that we don't tolerate anything that is racist or nature or preaching to violence. And beyond that, we actually let the boycott Israel websites stay on Israel, on our platform, sorry.
Let's look back a little bit into the venture capitals. Mr. Novik, I want to go to you and get a little picture of one of these companies. I'd love to hear about a sort of case study of one of the many Israeli companies, for example, that you work with. What makes them a unique global player? What's different about them?
An Israeli company.
Israeli, or if you can think of one that's not Israeli, then we
I think
can
I will
use,
actually
we
choose
can
a
use the
non-Israeli
opposite
company.
comparison too.
One of the companies that we invested in called Samli, and that was a very interesting story. That was 3 years ago. I read over the internet about an entrepreneur who developed an algorithm that summarizes articles. I was lazy enough to read the whole article to get more information about him, but I actually sent him an email. A few hours later, he called me. We spoke for 3 hours, and he was quite focused and determined in his way forward, moving forward with his company. Very, very focused, sounds very clear about the direction. And we sat to meet and asked him, Nick, when can we meet? And he actually said, sure, either early in the mornings or on weekends. And then I asked him why, and he said, because I'm studying. So I asked him, how old are you? And he said, I'm 15. So I said, okay, let's meet on the weekend, but bring your parents. And
these are the kind of people that make us all feel like we haven't accomplished anything, if it's at 15.
He came with his parents on the weekend, a skinny little boy, till he opened his mouth, and then the CEO came out of him. It was quite interesting. We actually brought some people from Hong Kong to evaluate the technology and the company. We decided to back him up. 2 years after, he sold his company to Yahoo in $30 million.
Not bad. Not bad for high school, I guess. Mr. Tirosh, any company for you also that sort of stands out from the others?
Yeah, sure. So if Gilad picked a 15-year-old entrepreneur, I'll pick the 65-year-old entrepreneur. I'll go to the other extreme. So, or maybe a little bit less. But about 2 years ago, we established a company following another route that we continue and explore, and this is cooperating with some of the academy institutes here in Israel. So we identified a very interesting academic research done in Tel Aviv University by Professor Averbuch and in Yale University by Professor Kaufman. And the core academic research was actually very general, as always it is in the academy. And it was about finding anomalies in big data. Now, this is a problem that the world keep on researching, and it has many applications. Actually, for them, the application that they had in mind is finding evidence of prostate cancer. So we sat with them, and we said, this is a very interesting piece of research, but we don't know much about prostate cancer. But we think we can take that into another area of cybersecurity and identifying fraud. And since then, what we did, which is it's part of the things that you do here in the high-tech community, you marry good technology with good business entrepreneurs. So we brought in a seasoned CEO to this company, Mark Gazit, and invested in this company through our incubator with a lot of help and a lot of hand-holding, actually shaping the proposition. Now, about 2 years after, the company has raised significant money. It's now installed in some of the major banks around the world, and it's helping them identifying cyber attacks and fraud incidents and so on. And for me, it's a great example of how to work with the academy and how to marry usually very theoretical research with the practical approach of business entrepreneurs.
Just taking the word management for a moment, I wonder if we're talking about Israeli companies succeeding globally, is there a significant difference from what you've seen in sort of Israeli management to other companies from around the world? Is there something that makes them successful or rather not?
I have to say that I think that today it's more and more like Silicon Valley. I see more and more like Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the culture, a lot of the management style, management skill, a lot of information move back and forth. And the more I see companies, it's pretty much identical.
I tend to agree. We always used to criticize ourselves and saying, okay, we're very good at technology, but we don't know how to sell, we don't know how to manage, we don't know how to do business development. I think it's now probably 25 years since this high-tech thing started. You have a lot of seasoned managers in the community, a lot of people that have been out there, worked in the U.S. or other countries, came back as expatriates, brought in a lot of knowledge. So I think we need to be a little bit less modest about our capabilities and actually be more confident about the ability of Israeli management teams take companies forward into very significant outcomes.
Yeah. Just to add one more thing that we do find is that this is true not only at what you call kind of management, but we see a lot of people at what we call the mid-managers, people like Professor Peterburg, when you said that you studied abroad. Many young people who studied abroad actually worked afterwards in international companies, large company, acquired all the what you call the international large-scale capabilities in terms of how to work in a very professional and organized manner, and together with the entrepreneur kind of spirit, I do think that there is a very good base here of managers.
So I want to step away from tech, from everything we've been talking about for a moment, go in a slightly different direction and take advantage of the fact that we have two women with an incredible collective experience as part of the panel. Is there the gender issue? Has it been an issue, Dr. Berry, for you? For example, you've been through academics, through government, through high tech, really on all of these spheres. Have you seen that as a problem?
Or an advantage.
Or an advantage.
First it was a peculiarity, and eventually I think it turned into an advantage. Normally, I have lots of stories, like when I served in the government, somebody came to my office and I was standing outside and he said, I came to see the chief scientist. Now, he passed by me and he just asked me, where is the office of the chief scientist? So I pointed to the office and I stayed outside. So, people need to know that they're dealing with people. It's about, we're measured by results. It's not like we're measured by...
Do they know that?
What is that?
Do they know that they're dealing with people?
No, not all of the people know, but enough people know that they want results, okay? And if you can prove yourself, sometimes it takes a little bit a longer run for that, but if you can prove yourself, and if you're not getting, showing any signs of lack of persistence or any kind of resistance that you need to have in order to get things done, eventually it goes. But it definitely, the perception is amazing. My youngest daughter, who is, she has many skills. She studies today physics and mathematics at the Technion, and she served in a technology unit, and when she was 9 years old, she elected to go and study missiles and aeronautical engineering. Good. So she comes to the class, and the very diligent advisor for those kids comes to her and says, Avital, aren't you offended by the virtue of the fact that you're the only girl in the class? Now, she didn't see that I just came in. I was in the back of my daughter, and my daughter told her, I came to this class because I'm interested in the topic, not in the company. And I was very proud of her, because this is, people need also to know to fight a little bit their way.
You have to have a certain attitude.
If society is retarded. And society is sometimes retarded, but also for color and religion and other things. So from my perspective, anyone who doesn't appreciate results, they can work with other people. There are plenty.
How about for you? Did you experience it in any anecdotes?
First, I want to say that the only time that people ask me these questions, that this is in these panels, and usually in my entire career I didn't come across that. I was fortunate to have my career in an area that was that the performance was the most important thing. I was in high tech. Most of my career was in high tech, where people are really looking at results. They don't care whether you're Indian, Chinese, Israeli, Jewish, Palestinian, woman, man. It's a gay parade this week, so gay. I think that it really depends on the industry. I think that in the high-tech industry, where people are only concerned about results, I don't think that there is any issue to any type of society segment.
So I think we only have about 2.5 minutes left. So in that time, to the VCs, Mr. Tirosh and Mr. Novik, let's look forward a little bit. If we were to say what is the next generation, and
I'm apologizing, but I'm going to have to run.
2.5 minutes, just kidding. Please, go ahead. Mr. Avrahami, thank you very much. Sure.
Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I guess we'll stay in suspense for the next.
We'll stay in
for the
suspense
next
for
conference.
the future of Israeli influence, but it will be there.
When you come and you are listening to you, it's interesting to see why you are succeeding outside. And I want to tell you that you said some very interesting things that came to my heart. As I said at the beginning of this conference, I used to be the French special envoy for the peace process. And I have to say that during these 3 years where I was working for the government, the French government, I know that the Israeli business sector has been one of my best partners to establish peace in this region. And I want to tell you that it has always been a pleasure to work with the private sector, and I'm sure that you can do even more to continue and to pave the way for peace. So thank you for everything you are doing and for your words. I also want to say that Professor Peterberg told me at the beginning that he wanted to challenge you and to see if you would be able to answer to his request and to his dream that there would be even more and more big companies like Teva. We are in a model which is so different from France, where in France we have very big companies, the CAC 40, but we are missing some startups. So I don't know if it is really possible to do both. I hope I have to say for Israel, for France, and for the rest of the world. But your passion is a driving force that we are all admiring. So thank you very much. I just want to say that we are going to have a break, and then we will have our third panel speaking about energy and water at 5:50. But as Nicolas Sarkozy and Sylvain Shalom will speak directly after this panel, I will ask everybody to be very early, maybe at 5:40, because these seats are going to be full very early. So thank you very much, and I look forward to see you later. Thank you.